After a rare series win in Sri Lanka, who makes the World Test Championship 11? We ask Michael Clarke, Aaron Finch and Callum Ferguson. Australia name a depleted squad for the Champions Trophy. Can the new look outfit still compete in Pakistan? And is Jos Buttler under pressure as England captain? For the final time this summer, let's go around the wicket. And welcome to Around the Wicket. I'm Nerily Meadows. Aaron Finch and Callum Ferguson alongside me, looking very sharp, Ferg.
That time of year, Nez, ready to roll.
Champions Trophy blazer. Go on, tell us again, when did you win it?
I won it in South Africa in 2009. Really exciting moment for me and the team, obviously. But it was a pretty proud moment. It was a bittersweet one. I blew my knee out that day as well, but certainly celebrated rightly.
The highest of highs and the lowest of lows. The Aussies have a couple of ODIs against Sri Lanka to prepare for the Champions Trophy, which starts next week in Pakistan for the Aussies. It's also going to be held in the UAE. Very different look pace attack for the Aussies from that 2023 ODI World Cup winning squad. What do you think about the mass exodus?
Well, it's going to be a totally different change and maybe a transition that we've seen or that has been called for over the last couple of years. I mean, Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, to play all three formats of the game is ridiculously taxing on their body and their mind as well, I think. So overall, I think someone like Nathan Ellis will get an opportunity to lead an attack as well, which the work that he's done over the last couple of years, every time he's played for Australia, he's been outstanding. So I think that'd be just rewards. Can
they still compete?
Absolutely. The talent runs deep. We've seen that over the last few years in the Australian camp, and they have had the opportunity to blood some players throughout that journey. George Bailey and Andrew McDonald have done a good job on that front. Now that we've seen a few guys go down in some forced changes, I think we're well prepared for it, and it gives also someone like Sean Abbott potentially an opportunity.
Essentially, we were almost calling for this before it's happened. Now their hand has almost been forced as selectors to move on to the next phase. Is that how you're seeing it? Almost a silver lining to the clouds?
Well, I think that this would have been something that has been planned for a long time between George Bailey, Tony Doddermate, Andrew McDonald, Pat Cummins as well. So for me, they don't do anything by accident. This Australian coaching group in particular and selection group, everything is well thought out. Yes, if there's a couple of injuries here and there, that you have to make necessary changes. But overall, I think that it would have been something that they've been planning for a long time, mainly with a vision to win that 2027 World Cup, in my opinion. That's probably a bigger tournament than, well, it is a bigger tournament than the Champions Trophy. But it might mean that Spencer Johnson gets another opportunity to really push his case forward to play cricket for Australia for a long time.
So maybe they were foxing us all along by announcing that original squad a few weeks ago. Marcus Stoinis was in that original squad. He came out and announced his retirement from ODI cricket. What did you think about the timing of this after they backed him in despite a lean run in ODIs?
It was a really interesting call, and it was one that hit me by surprise, and I think most of Australian supporters. And look, to be honest, it's probably gotten to the point where it was close to go time for the tournament over there, and he's just gone. It's dawned on him like, maybe this is a bit too much. I want to step away and get into the T20 side of things, and that's his call to make. And it is a late call though. It'll have the Australians scrambling somewhat.
Was it a fair call from him, or was it too late?
Well, I think when you've had the faith put in you by the selection and the coach and the captain, maybe a little bit more of a heads up, said, you know what, this is what I'm thinking. And I'd be surprised if it was just an off-the-cuff decision as well. I'm sure that they would have been planning down the track. There would have been some conversations that were had between Andrew McDonald, Marcus Stoinis to try and get to this decision that they've made. But, I mean, at the end of the day, each player has the opportunity to decide what their fate is going forward. And for me, when you look at Marcus Stoinis over the last couple of years, he's preferred to play the T20 route, being in Pakistan and straight into India after a summer of cricket. That can potentially be 4 or 5 months on the road. So maybe that contributed to the decision. But overall, I think that he can leave ODI cricket with his head held high.
I think also if he's having doubts at this stage, the best thing is to pull the pin on it, not just make his way through it and hope to be a part of another win. If he's not sure, he's made the right call. So
no Mitch Marsh, no Marcus Stoinis. Who's the all-rounder that steps up in that role?
Well, that's a good question. And I think someone like Sean Abbott is a predominantly bowling all-rounder as opposed to Marcus Stoinis, who's a batting all-rounder in my opinion. I think that he'll have a really big impact as well, and he can step up into that role should he be selected. He's somebody who we've seen make really important runs at domestic level, and even when he's had his opportunities for Australia as well. So I think that he then becomes the third quick, but bats at probably number 7 and is able to have that real impetus towards the back end of an innings. Champions
Trophy, you've won it, Ferg. How tough is it and what's unique about it?
Oh, look, it's the best of the best when it comes to the ICC rankings. So it is intense from ball one. There's no warming into the tournament. You've got to be on your game from ball one. And I think that's the biggest thing. The Australians, we've seen them start a little bit slowly in some World Cups in recent times. So they're going to have to really sort that out, make sure they're good to go from game one.
Afghanistan, South Africa and England in the Group B with the Aussies. How tough is it going to be in Pakistan?
That's a ridiculously tough group. And it's the top 8 teams in the world. So, if you think back to the 50-over World Cup, Australia's 7 for 91 against Afghanistan at Wankhede. Glenn Maxwell plays the greatest ever ODI knock to get them out of trouble. That would have been them out of the tournament had they not gone on to win that. South Africa have had some good success over Australia in bilaterals, but Australia have had the better of them in knockout games in World Cups over the history of it. And England, who knows what they're going to deliver at this time. They've been so up and down, more down than up recently, but the way that they play, they can hurt you on any given day.
We'll talk more about England a little bit later because it has been a bit of a low period at the moment. But Finchy, just on the biggest threat for Australia this tournament, can you tell me more?
I think it's South Africa. I think that they match up really well against Australia. They've got great quick bowling options. They've got great spinning options, and they've got some of the best batters in the world. You'd think Heinrich Klaassen, he's as good a player of pace and spin as anyone in the world. So I think that they throw a really big challenge at Australia, particularly early in the tournament. Like Ferg said, you can't start slowly in the Champions Trophy. It's a tournament you have to be on your game from ball one.
You've always said the choking tag exists with South Africa, the ICC tournaments. Ferg, on India, Jasprit Bumrah has officially been ruled out. Yeah. Interesting, Yashasvi Jaswal has been left out of the squad. In comes Varun Chakravarti and Harshit Rana. Thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting change. I love Jaiswal as a player, but his form has been a little bit up and down. And I think those changes will give them some flexibility in the squad. But it was surprising to see those two drop out of the squad. Obviously, Jasprit's been battling some injuries, obviously, but Jaiswal in particular was a surprise for me.
All right, don't go anywhere because after this short break, we're going to take a look back at those tests in Sri Lanka and a look ahead to who will make the 11 in the World Test Championship final against Finchy's favourite South Africa, Michael Clarke, next. Former Aussie captain Michael Clarke joins us now. Pup, so great to have your company as always. A rare series victory in Asia for the Aussie Test squad. I wanted to give Steve Smith a big pump up for the way that he was scoring runs over there and captaining the side, but you think the quality of the opposition may be the first talking point?
How are you guys? Thanks for having me. I think first and foremost, you've got to praise Australia. I think the way they played, but I think you've also got to be realistic. I love Sri Lanka as a country. I love the people. I've spent a lot of time there, but they were horrible at best. That was a dreadful performance. And from a viewer's perspective as well, we've just seen some unreal test cricket through the Australian summer. And honestly, I'm a test cricket tragic. I couldn't sit there and watch the second test. They were terrible. They were down on confidence. I think the biggest surprise was Australia outspun them, the way we bowled spin and then the way we played spin. You know, we showed Sri Lanka in their own backyard how to play. So certainly praise Australia. Smitty took over the captaincy and batted like a genius. So they deserve the credit they get. But I think you've got to be realistic and say Sri Lanka were as bad as I've seen him for a long time.
That's why we love Pup on this show. Tells it like he sees it. Steve Smith, though, is it scary given the summer he put together against India, 4 test hundreds in the last 5 tests? Is it scary for the Ashes next year for England? Oh,
absolutely. His record against England is unbelievable as well. But I think he did some really tough yards in the test series against India. I mean, the second test at Brisbane, I mean, he batted average. It was average at best, but he found a way to get through, and that's what great players do. he said it himself, he needed time in the middle because felt like for a long time there, every time he made a mistake, he was out. And that's a tough place for a batter. Often you might get a bit of luck. You get a catch that just goes down or just wide, but he seemed every time he nicked it, he was out. Every time he got hit in the pad, he was in front. So you just needed that little break. And when he got it, I mean, he's as good as I've ever seen. So that was special. Realistically,
how long do you think he can play for? 36 in June, just ahead of the World Test Championship final?
I think the away Ashes in 2027 will be a huge carrot for him. Australia haven't won in England outright. They've retained the trophy a couple of times, but they haven't won there for a long time. So I think that will be a huge carrot for Steve Smith.
Pup, in terms of leadership, no Pat Cummins in this series, no Pat Cummins at the Champions Trophy. So Steve Smith has stepped up, and there's been a lot of praise tactically for him as captain. Now, by no means am I saying replace Pat Cummins full-time or anything like that, but purely tactically, do you think that Steve Smith is a better Test captain than Pat Cummins?
Probably tactically, yeah. I think Smitty's as good as any when it comes to the on-field tactics. Yeah, I think the other thing, captaining in Australia is very different to captaining in the subcontinent. One of the things you could see when obviously Smitty captaining these two tests against Sri Lanka is how good a player he is against spin. So what that allows you to do as a batsman, you read the pitch, you read the spin bowler, you read the angles. So that helps you as a captain in regards to setting fields to your spinners as well. So I think it was on display. There's no doubt about it. I think, like I say, Smitty's captaincy was tremendous through the Sri Lankan series. His batting was just as good. And the bowlers certainly backed him up with the fields that he had. And look, I think it would have done Paddy Cummins the world of good. I think Paddy tactically has continued to improve, and I think that'll keep being the case. So I think if he was playing, Australia still would have won the series with Paddy Cummins being captain, and I think he would have done a great job. Smitty just probably takes a little bit of pressure off the bowlers in regards to setting fields. When he's captain in those conditions, he probably would have had more of an impact on field set to the spinners than, say, Paddy might have.
Alex Carey, Ferg, put together a stunning knock, and he's been in wonderful form of late. Was that a statement knock from him, especially given that he was promoted up the order with Inglis off the field, couldn't bat where he was picked, and then the fact that Inglis was coming off a ton in that first test? So there was question marks or conversations at least about pressure on Carey.
Look, one thing I will say is the strength of the Australian wicket-keeping fraternity has always been at its best in the Australian Test team when there's been a battle for a spot potentially or pressure coming from in behind. We've got two batters that are wicket keepers who could easily bat in the top six in the Test side right now. I remember we were talking all through the Australian summer about Alex Carey's technique and how it was as good as we've got in the Australian team at the moment. So what we have now is two wicket-keeper batsmen that could bat in the top six for us, and I think he's well on his way to being one of our very best ever. And he's been fantastic all the way through the last 18 months. His wicket-keeping is incredible at the moment, particularly in Asia. So I think he's just been a wonderful performer, consistent now as well. But that pressure coming from Josh Inglis is leaving us in a great spot.
One of the chances to be one of the best ever.
One of our best ever.
Adam Gilchrist was pretty good.
He was good, absolutely. I'm not sure
Ian
he'll
Healy
surpass
wasn't
him.
bad either.
Yeah, Brad Haddon.
Hads is definitely there, obviously, but I reckon he's going to be right up there with those guys because his form over the last few years would suggest he's trending.
I think the one thing, Ferg, where I agree with what you said in regards to his keeping in Sri Lanka this series was a standout. I think a lot of people don't understand that natural variation you get in a subcontinent pitch, certainly over a 4 or 5 day period. It's so hard to continue to glove the ball as consistently as he did. So I agree, he certainly should be praised for how well he's keeping at the moment, first and foremost. And he's batting, well, icing on the cake. It was great to see him make runs as well.
Well, just on that, he's now averaging more overseas than he is in Australia. Astonishing numbers. It's so rare that we see that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you can see there he's got to 100 outside of Australia and in Australia. But I think when you're playing outside Australia, there's been quite a few series in the subcontinent. So that plays into his hands a lot as well. There's a lot of spin that he faces. So that then, I think, makes him more comfortable batting outside of Australia as well. And, I mean, at times through his career, Australia top order have been knocked over, so he's been exposed to the new ball quite early. Whereas I think when you're playing on some flatter wickets, things happen faster, but I think you get longer time to assess the conditions and then formulate a plan in your head.
Pup, Marnus Labuschagne, I want to read you some numbers because they are concerning. In his last 4 test series, he's averaging just 22 at a strike rate of 45, no hundreds, and in his last 50 innings, just 1 test 100. Has the time come?
He's due for a big one. Test championship could be the time, could be the place. Look, the numbers don't read well, but very rarely do they when you're out of form. Look, I hope they pick him for the Test championship. It's completely different conditions against a different team. He's played a lot of county cricket. He knows English conditions as well as anyone. Remember, he bats in the hardest place as well. I think number 3 is the hardest place to bat in Test cricket. You're right. The numbers don't tell a lie. He's out of form. He's due. And to me, I reckon the Test championship is, it could be his last opportunity. I think, going to West Indies, I would like to think that's an opportunity to give a young player a go if Marnus makes no runs in this Test championship. If he does, then no doubt he holds his spot because he's been a wonderful player. And I think we've got to remember that as well. Over a period of time, he's batted in that position and been super successful. But now, Australia's probably got 15 or 16 players fighting to get in that 11. So if you're not putting the numbers on the board, they're going to pick someone else.
Well, I put you under pressure and I asked for your Test 11 as well as yours, Finchy, at the World Test Championship final. You're sticking with Marnus and you're saying that's his last opportunity potentially. Finchy, you've made the call that it's time to move on from Marnus Labuschagne.
Yeah, I've gone with Cameron Green or Josh Inglis there at number 3. And the reason is, I just think that it's such a concern because it's been over 4 series. If it's over 2 or 3, I think that you can say, you know what, he's just around the corner. But the fact that it's been 4, to me, that's a really alarming sign. And Josh Inglis, I think, to get him into the side, he will get that opportunity. Or if Cameron Green is healthy, he just provides so much extra to that bowling lineup as well as with the bat. He's got the ability to bat anywhere in the order. And the difference in Pup and I is I've gone for Scotty Boland, and maybe that's my Victorian bias over Josh Hazlewood, but
you're allowed to.
Yeah, that's just the only other change.
Pup, just on the World Test Championship final, what do you think? Should it be the players who got you there, or should it be the best 11 to win on that day in those conditions against that opposition?
Yeah. And there's, you know what? I don't know. It's a really good question. To me, I think it's, because at any stage someone could get injured. So you probably have to pick your best 11 in that moment. You look at someone like a Cameron Green who's been in and around that Australian team. He's been injured. If he's fully fit to bat and bowl, then you can understand why Australia bring him straight back in. So I think you've probably got to pick your best 11 that's available in that moment. But it's a good question in and around the rules of, how that Test championship should be selected.
Ferg, you're sticking with Marnus?
Yeah, I am. And I'm batting Green at 6 if I'm picking that side, and I'm backing the 4 bowlers in to get the job done in a one-off hit out in a Test match. I think.
So assuming Green's not bowling.
Yeah, assuming he's not, he's just in there as a batter, and I think those 4 quicks will get through. We didn't use Mitch Marsh a lot over the last few years. He's been in at that number 6 position, so we've played effectively without that stone cold all-rounder in that position, bowling 10 overs a day. So that's how I see it.
Pup, thank you very much for joining us right throughout the season on Around the Wicket. We hope you're back next year for the Ashes. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, guys. I've loved it. Thanks for putting up with me.
Always a pleasure. Don't go anywhere because speaking of the Ashes, we're going to talk about England's white ball team next. Focus will be on England for Australia as they open their Champions Trophy campaign on February 22 in Pakistan. And fair to say England's era under Brendan McCullum as white ball coach hasn't started particularly well. 4-1 losing in the T20 International Series in India, and they've lost the ODI series as well. Thoughts?
Well, they'll be under pressure, no doubt. The last 2 ICC events have been really poor. The 50 over World Cup in India, they failed to qualify for the next round. The T20 World Cup, they were poor as well. So overall, the pressure will be on England. The pressure will be on Jos Buttler as well. I think that after winning the initial T20 World Cup here in Australia, once he took over the captaincy, they've had some really really poor tournament. So he'll feel it. His captaincy will well and truly be under the microscope.
It's a new era. Yeah, it's a new era, obviously, under Brendan McCullum, but Jos has been captain for a long time now. So, look, I think this will be his last opportunity to try and turn this ship around. Brendan McCullum, yes, he'll bring a different angle and potentially an edge to this lineup, but history is starting to build on them and it's snowballing and it's getting out of control.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be too worried about the 4-1 and then being down 2-0. When a new coach takes over, it takes a little bit of time to work out where everyone fits in the side, and he'll have a different angle to what the previous coach did. So for me, I'm not too worried about that, but it's just the way that they're playing. I think they need to get back to being aggressive.
Apologies, didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm interested in the fact that Jos Buttler is a T20 World Cup winner. What is it about the 50-over game that's not clicking for him at the moment as one white ball captain to another?
Well, I think it's just a different tempo of the game, and he's batting in a position that is probably the hardest. I think number 5 and 6 in one-day cricket is really difficult because you've got different scenarios every game. You don't have the access to the field up, the new ball, ways that you can sort of get into your inning quickly. You have to take risks to get into your innings. But as a captain, I think they're still trying to find out how they can get wickets when they don't have Adil Rashid at his absolute best. He's so important for their side. And with the bat, they're sort of caught in a transition at the moment where do we go back to absolute aggression and all-out attack, or do we stop relying so heavily on Joe Root to be the one that the foundation that everyone bats around? So for me, they've just got to find that balance again and find the personnel to do it.
The Guardian UK, Ferg, came out and said the Indian tour is proof that baseball is a death cult. England are, on the numbers, suddenly terrible at cricket and terrible in a way that feels uniform and on message. And they reference the numbers of both women's and men's cricket and how much they've lost recently. So back home in England, they're getting stuck in.
Yeah, the knives are out, aren't they, really? And we see that over in England, and it becomes a real it becomes a real pressure cooker for the English lineup. So, look, it's going to take a fair bit to turn the ship around really, really quickly in a major tournament. And Finch's point about Adil Rashid's a really good one. He's been the barometer for that lineup, a little bit like Adam Zampa has in big tournaments as well. It's going to be really important they get him up and running. But I do feel as though they need to start being a little bit more adaptable with their batting. At the moment, they're all going out there and playing one way. I just remember Finchy and David Warner's dynamic at the top of the order. If one of them was going, the other player was happy to settle in behind. I'm not sure that's happening in the England lineup at the moment.
Also happening in the UK is privatisation, essentially, of the 100. And we've seen the Sun Group, the owners of IPL side Sunrisers Hyderabad, take 100% stake in Northern Superchargers. Other companies have taken a 49% stake in recent weeks in the sale of the 100. What do you think about this whole situation in cricket?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that it happens all around the world, that teams start to build competitions to then sell off chunks of it. The one issue that I have is the sustainability of English cricket on the back of it. So they have to be really wise with how they allocate this money now and how they take the game forward, because cricket's in a delicate space when there's so many T20 leagues trying to encroach onto international and domestic competitions, the longer games. So for me, if they spend this money really wisely, then they've got a great opportunity to move forward.
I agree 100%. This is a really big... I think England and Australia, I felt like, were the two that were holding out and really saying, look, we're not ready to make this move. They've made the move now, the ECB. The next point is, will Cricket Australia start to look at this seriously? Because I don't reckon it's really been an overly serious conversation within the heavyweights of Australian Cricket Administration. But this is a bit of a line in the sand moment for T20 domestic cricket, I think.
Do you think we could see it in the Big Bash?
Yeah, I think we will eventually, no doubt. Not sure whether it'll be in the next 5 or 10 years, but I think down the track it definitely will. Cricket's been harder. Well, it's harder in cricket to make money these days. So I think the fact that people are still willing to buy franchises and put their own stamp on it, I think that there's a lot of high performance that comes out of that as well. Yes, Cricket Australia at the moment have got a great high performance model, but so have these franchises are buying all around the world. They're building their own academies and setups for the sustainable success of their franchise. So I think it'll be inevitable.
It has led to a connection with Tom Brady. It was Super Bowl week this week. Tom Brady's got a link to the Birmingham Phoenix. What do you think about that? Will we be stopping him for a game of the 100 this year?
I think it's really cool, and I certainly hope so, because it brings a lot of eyes and attention to the game, but I also think that it's a sign that we're going to see the game grow in America, and it's just another sign, to be honest. There's been a lot of them suggesting that the American market is where cricket's moving to next in a big way, and we've already seen it grow legs really, really quickly and probably grow at a faster rate than we were expecting initially. So this is another example of America getting involved in cricket. I love it.
Having played in the US in the inaugural MLC, it wasn't just expats who were coming to the games. It was second and third generation subcontinent families that hadn't experienced cricket before. So I think that's one part of the market that is so untapped, and the fact that it's getting in there now is unbelievable.
Interesting space in the world of cricket. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take on the short stuff next. The Aussies celebrated hard after a Test Series win in Sri Lanka. And how about this? Another golf trip at Eddie Cowan. That was on Travis Head's Instagram, and it was shared by a lot of the boys. Going back to comments about having the preparation in Dubai as opposed to in Sri Lanka, what do we think about keeping receipts?
Love it. Absolutely love it. I think that every player does it. But now players have just got the platform to be able to put it out there and say, hey, we remember this. Yeah. And the one thing about going to Dubai is that they're able to control their preparation. Yes. And that's exactly what they wanted to do. Similar conditions, but have absolutely what they wanted right there. You don't always get that in subcontinent tours.
What receipts have you kept over the years?
Oh, good question, actually. I'm not too sure, but I've got Dan Christian in the gun at some stage, I reckon, because he pulled way too many pranks on me. But if just talking about Travis Head, don't ever change. How good's that? I thought that was hilarious.
David Bettingham moving his wedding for the SA20 final. Is all fair in love and cricket?
Well, it's hard to find a time for a wedding in cricket. You have to plan out a long way ahead. But it also has to be flexible because T20 tournaments run long, or they change the dates at the last minute. So very tough time of the year.
Genuinely, it is tough as a cricketer planning a wedding, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's usually about a 2 or 3 week gap at the end of the summer, usually in April, where there's probably about 10 to 12 weddings across the country, and guys are trying to pick out which one to go to.
If Green and Webster are in the World Test Championship final, could you just have 2 in the slips, Cord and Gully?
Yep, they're both enormous, great hands.
Huge. Wingspan, amazing.
Who wins the Champions Trophy?
I think Australia win it.
Guys, thank you very much for joining us on Season 2 of Around the Wicket, and thanks for tuning in.